Welcome back, Heat Seekers. It's Thanksgiving week. Hopefully you're looking for some IDP goodness and maybe a couple dogs too. I got some of those for you. We got some IDP waiver wire pickups heading into week 12 that hopefully will help you with a cornucopia of successful wins in fantasy football. With that being said, Mr. Kraig, as always, is with me. Who are we talking about at the linebacker position?
Well, we're looking for guys that aren't going to be giving you any turkeys this Thanksgiving. And one of them is a guy that looked like a turkey for most of this year here so far. Zach Cunningham, linebacker of the Houston Texans. He had a lot of fantasy football love from people heading into the season as the main, hopefully, guy in the middle for the rebuilding Texans. And it just didn't end up being that case. He only played between 52 and 21% of the snaps from weeks 5 through week 8, which is just no bueno. But once Christian Kirksey went on IR with an injury, Cunningham became a starter again. In the past 2 weeks that Houston has played, they were out of bye for week 10. He has 8 solos, 11 assists, a tackle for a loss, pass deflection, and a forced fumble. So it's nothing amazing or really up to the level that people were hoping coming into this season, but it's a lot better than what he had been doing. And week 12 brings the Jets, who give up the 12th most points to opposing linebackers. And Cunningham really should continue to be a full-time starter for Houston. They really have 2 linebackers each week, pretty much getting 100% of the snaps. The other ones being Camo, J. Hill. But Cunningham's filling in with Kirksey out, and Kirksey, there's really been no updates on him when he's going to return. So, again, rest of the season, Cunningham may actually be viable after we left him for dead.
Yeah, and for anybody who's looking, if you're looking at the stats, he's had three of his 11 games have been playable. Other than that, it's been very not exciting. But looking to fantasy playoffs, he's got good matchups: Jets, Colts, Seahawks, Jaguars, Chargers, 49ers. Those are favorable matchups to a linebacker. So definitely a guy that you should target, because not only is he been solid now that he's truly back in the starting position, but moving forward, he should have really nice matchups as well if you're looking for help.
Next one after that is another guy that, in a different way, people have been excited about for the season. It's Quincy Williams, linebacker for the Jets. We had mentioned him previously this season. So he got cut by the Jaguars right at the end of the season, got picked up by the Jets. Didn't play week 1. The next 4 weeks, he just came out of the gates on fire for him as they were looking for a guy to fill in for Jared Davis, which he did. He got some nagging injuries. Some guys got healthy. They started rotating stuff. And week 7 through week 10, he had somewhere between 24 to 66% snap share and just wasn't getting you a whole lot of stats. And he's been dropped in most leagues since then. This past week, he also did not start, but he quickly took over for Jared Davis, and it seems like that experiment may be over for the Jets. Yes, Brad, you can tell as shocked as a Lions fan that it came to that. On an 89% snap share this past week, he had 10 solos, 5 assists, and 2 tackles for a loss, which is, again, more in line with what he had been doing those first 4 or 5 weeks of the season when he was just a man on fire.
And he looked healthy, too.
Yeah, and I also think that the Jets would be smart to see if, hey, is he going to be a piece that we can potentially have here going forward with his brother Quinnen on the defensive line? He probably won't command a huge salary off his 1-year contract here, and he's a young guy. There's a 3rd round with a lot of hopes for him. He just couldn't stay healthy. So I think that they're playing the Texans here. They give up the 4th most points to opposing linebackers, so it's a great matchup. And the Jets are in defense a lot. We know that, and that gives you the opportunity for points. And Williams has just actually been a quality player for him this year. So if he was dropped, go ahead and get him. And especially if you play on Sleeper, he has defensive back eligibility, which is just crazy. But being able to put a guy like him in it as defensive back, that's
Chico, yeah. And he's another one that's got a favorable playoff matchup: Texans, Eagles, Saints, Dolphins, Jaguars, Bucks. And there's, other than the Bucks in week 17, those are all pretty solid matchups for the linebacker. And unfortunately, this guy's, I think, gotten a raw shake just because he's a bit undersized for a linebacker. I think he's like under 6 foot or just at 6 foot. But what he makes up for, his lack of height, he makes up for in just the range. I would venture to say sideline to sideline. Maybe not at the elite level, but he's very good getting sideline to sideline and getting those tackles. And this year we've seen a little bit more. We've seen some pass deflections and sacks and some other things sprinkled in there. So he's a really interesting pickup for the rest of the season for sure.
And finally, we have another blast from the past for Brad here. We mentioned Kyle Van Noy, linebacker, now again for the Patriots. So surprisingly, with the Roto Heat scoring that we've talked about before, and you can find linked on YouTube, also an article at rotoheat.com, he's a top 35 linebacker. on the year, which I found surprising.
Top 60, 70 player overall, really.
Yeah, and the Patriots do weird stuff with their linebackers. He's got a 77% snap share in the games that he's played, so it's not amazing, but it's been good enough. They have their bye, coming up in week 14. Pay attention to that. But he's on a hot streak, and he has at least 5 solos and 1 sack in each of the past 2 games going against teams that give up a lot of points to opposing linebackers. He's got another one this week. And the Tennessee Titans, who give up a lot of points, like I said, to opposing linebackers, but also just aren't doing a great job of keeping their quarterback healthy and having healthy guys for the ball to be thrown to. So another good matchup, or a guy that probably isn't rostered as much as he should be with what he's been doing this year, but it's just a name that I think players have gotten sick of seeing and rostering for a while and then having him not do a whole lot in stints with Miami and Detroit. So he's been probably where he belongs.
Well, I'm about to say from week 3 to 9, he really wasn't very playable. He had 1 week he was getting close to double-digit points. Otherwise, it was not much to write home about. So it's not surprising if he's available in a lot of leagues. Definitely a guy that you can target because he has, as of recently, been on fire. But I would temper the expectations with the Bills. 2 games against the Bills. You never know what version of the Bills you're getting right now. I don't know. Of the 3 linebackers this week, that's probably the order. I'd probably look Quincy, Zach, and then Kyle if I was putting my money where my mouth is and going after one of these guys.
And it really depends on what you need. If you're looking at for just a bye week injury, fill in for a week or something here because someone goes on the COVID list late and he's available, he's a good plug-in. But you do have to figure out what do you need and who's available to put these guys in your own sort of order for the year.
For sure. All right, so what DBs are we looking at?
A Brad highlight reel here. Players that have been on his team or that he's liked. We got Darnell Savage here.
Or still on my team, and Darnell Savage's played.
Yeah, and you've heard us talk about him in the offseason quite a bit. He has not lived up to the expectations, but if you play IDP, you realize this year most of the big names or the young guns that you're really hopeful for haven't done so here. Right now, he's our safety number 52 on the year, which is pretty low. And that's despite having a 94% snap share on the year, which is great. The production just isn't there.
He is coming off 2 extra interceptions last week, too.
Catching those makes a big difference. That's true. But he's coming off his best game of the year, and the Week 12 opponent is the Rams, who give up the 5th most points to opposing safeties. So he's starting to get in a groove here, and I think part of the reason of that is look at where Savage has been playing. He fits better as a strong safety, playing closer to the line, and he did a lot more of that this past week going against Minnesota. And I think that's something that they're going to need to do again with just the poor state of the linebacking core. The Packers, they've just been eviscerated by injuries, quite honestly, and Savage fits the role of that linebacker safety hybrid, and they used him a bit more like that this past week. And he had a good game for him, even though they didn't win. So I'm thinking, hoping / expecting him to get a little bit more of that because he's just been useful when they've used him that way.
And it'll be interesting to see how he plays a quarterback that team is very familiar with, and they've been playing Stafford for years. So it'll be interesting to see because I'm sure they know his tendencies and maybe some of the things that make him tick, and just see how they play that. And he's been playable. It feels like Savage is like an every other week guy. Like every other week you can get a really okay game out of him, it seems like, over the last month or two. And then you get every other game where it's just, oh, did I put him in my lineup? Oh my gosh. Love the player. It'll be interesting to see if he can keep up this pace. He's had 2 of his last 3 games have been solid, not spectacular, but solid.
Next safety here is in another really unique situation. It's Cameron Curl for the Washington football team. He came on last year when they had an injury, Landon Collins, and he just had a great year out of nowhere. Unique situation here in that, so the Washington football team, for most of the year, they've had really one linebacker that they can count on in Cole Holcomb. And in 6 out of 10 games this year, Washington has had 3 safeties all get at least a 79% snap share, which is crazy, even a league when you're having more safeties on the field, fewer linebackers, the other 2 being Landon Collins and Bobby McCain. Since week 5, when this sort of started evening out when they were doing this, Curl's had at least an 89% snap share. And in that same time frame, he has not had fewer than 4 solo tackles and also not fewer than 6 combined tackles. So for a safety, he's having a really nice floor for you, and he's being used all over the field. Yeah, he's having a lot of snaps at safety, but the slot corner, they're using him in the box. They've had some snaps on the defense line. They're really trying to shake things up and try to find a way to get all these linebackers to be productive for him. So he has a really nice floor again. And this week, it's not a great play with Seattle. They're around like 27th in points to opposing safeties. But I feel with the way that he's being used from the week 6 time, he's a safe play. And this is the time of year when you don't want to get too cute with stuff. And if you can find a guy like him to play that's going to get the snaps and going to get you floor tackles with potentially some big plays, tackles for a loss and stuff when you're playing that close to the line, I really like him if he's available, which he is in a good amount of leagues yet.
Yeah, just looking over the last 5 games he played, minus the bye, 7 tackles, 5 tackles, 5 tackles, 4 tackles, 7 tackles, and that's not assists, that's just pure tackles. So
yeah,
definitely somebody who's worthwhile to look at, and he's a sure tackler. So it's not like Rivera is not going to trust him on the field. He's pretty well solidified himself as a guy that needs to be on the field on this defense in the middle or the secondary. So definitely a good play. What corner are we looking at?
Yeah, here's your dart throw corner of the week based on snap share matchup and production. It's Terence Mitchell of the Houston Texans. They play the Jets this coming week. Jets give up the 3rd most points to opposing cornerbacks on the year. He is free in every league that I have seen. He's coming off one of his, actually, I believe it was the best game of his season so far against Tennessee. And Tennessee this year had not been giving up a ton of points to opposing cornerbacks. And he has at least 3 combined tackles in all but 1 game this year, which, I mean, is not an amazing floor, but he's at least going to get you a few. It's a great matchup coming off a good game, and he's on the field nearly 100% of the snaps this year. So, again, it's the equation that you're looking for. Great matchup on the field, somewhat of a floor for tackles. And considering that he's free, if you need a cornerback again to just pick up that you're going to be able to find probably without using waiver wire dollars, he's my pick for the week.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt. Doesn't hurt at all. All right, so round it out. What defensive lineman are we talking about?
Yeah, this is always the hardest one to find guys that, by and large, we try not to talk about the same people each week because hopefully some of these players are getting picked up and people on bye and all that. So this person is on bye this week. It's Zach Allen, defensive end of the Arizona Cardinals. So a little bit of explanation as to why you're picking up a guy on bye. Weeks 13, 14, and 15, he faces the Bears, the Rams, and the Lions. Now, the Bears are 3rd currently in points allowed to opposing defensive ends. Rams are 23rd, which not great, not a lot for that week. But then the Lions are 5th. So 2 out of the next 3 weeks in either leading up to the playoffs or potential playoff matchups, he's going to be in a good position to get you points. He's at a 54% snap share on the year, but from week 8 on, which is the week after J.J. Watt's season officially ended as far as playing time, Allen has a 78% snap share. And over that time, he has 11 solos, 6 assists, 2 pass deflections, a tackle for a loss, a sack, and a fumble recovery. So for a defensive end that has a couple nice matchups coming up, he's on the field, and he's getting you production and virtually unowned.
Yeah, that's a very good thing. All right, who's our next
one?
end?
Yeah, Emmanuel Ogbah. So this one's interesting because you've seen his name come up and he's bounced around from teams. He's our number 12 defensive end on the year, but that's a bit misleading. You'd think, wow, number 12 would probably be more widely owned or more widely rostered, but that's largely due to a huge game in week 9 against the Texans. He had 2 solos, 2 assists, 2 tackles for a loss, 2.5 sacks, and a pass deflection. That's going to be a great week for anyone. That's not the norm for him or most players. He does lead Miami defensive lineman with a 67% snap share on the year. Week 12 here brings the Panthers, who give up the most points to opposing defensive ends on the year. Really, he's a guy that needs to get you a tackle, sack, some sort of big play like that to be worthwhile for you. But he has at least 1 big play on 7 out of 11 games this year. And with a great matchup, I really think there's a great chance he gets you 1 or 2 of these. So not a guy if you're in a tackle heavy league, but balanced or big play, he's a guy to be looking for.
And depending on how your league scores pass deflections, I think he's had 1 in 7 or 8 games this year as well. That can help a little bit. Maybe not as sexy as an interception or sack or fumble or any of that, but still helpful in the stack column. And he's done pretty well over the last month and a half, and he's been playable. He's had a couple of really big weeks and then some that were not as exciting, but certainly not going to kill you either. So if he's available in your scoring in your league, definitely an interesting guy to go after for sure. What DT are we talking about?
Yeah, a guy that some of you probably have not even heard of before, but we got Malik McDowell, defensive tackle for the Cleveland Browns. So he is leading the team's defensive tackles with a 66% snap share, and he doesn't have a great stat line, but that's the case for most defensive tackles, especially if you're streaming them. Right. Got 14 solos, 8 assists, 6 tackles for a loss, 3 sacks, and a fumble recovery. So again, someone that you are going to need to get a big play from, but in 5 out of his last 7 games, he's gotten you a tackle tackle for a loss, sack, something like that. So he's been doing well as of late. And this next week brings the Ravens, who give up the third most points to opposing defensive tackles on the year. So the Browns are in bye week 13, but if you are streaming defensive tackles, like we've suggested, if you don't have one of the big names, that really doesn't matter to you anyway, because you'd probably be dropping them if you had them this week anyway.
Yeah, he's got 2 games back to back with the Ravens, basically with a bye in between. So it'll be interesting to see how he performs this weekend against the Ravens. So that's it, folks. So if you got questions, drop them below. We do appreciate you guys, all the support you've been showing the channel. We are here to help if you guys need us, and we'll talk to you again next week.